When people first heard about Dutton Ranch, there was one major fear hanging over the entire project. Would this actually feel like a true continuation of Yellowstone, or would it just be another spin-off using familiar faces to cash in on the franchise? After the first two episodes, I honestly think we finally have the answer. Dutton Ranch is not pretending to be Yellowstone. It understands what Yellowstone really was, and that is exactly why it works. Because Yellowstone was never just about Montana, cowboys, or even the Dutton family itself. At its core, Yellowstone was always about damaged people trying to preserve peace through violence, while secretly destroying themselves in the process. And episodes 1 and 2 of Dutton Ranch carry that exact emotional DNA. The proof of that comes almost immediately in the opening wildfire sequence. When Rip Wheeler rides directly into a wall of flames to save a terrified calf, the scene feels bigger than just action spectacle. It tells viewers something important about who Rip still is underneath everything that happened in Yellowstone. He is still the same man willing to risk death for responsibility, the same man who believes protecting the ranch matters more than protecting himself. But what makes the scene special is how cinematic it feels compared to earlier Yellowstone storytelling. The franchise has always had emotional intensity, but Dutton Ranch suddenly feels larger in scale. The fire sequence genuinely looks dangerous. You feel the heat, you feel the panic, and for a brief moment, it feels like Beth, Rip, and Carter might actually lose everything before this new chapter even begins. That matters because the ranch they lose in Montana represented something different from the original Yellowstone ranch. It belonged to Beth and Rip, not John Dutton. Not the family legacy, theirs. And the fire destroying that dream before it fully begins is the show's way of telling us that these characters are still trapped inside the same cycle Yellowstone built them around. Every time they get close to peace, chaos finds them again. That is what makes Dutton Ranch feel like a true sequel instead of just another Western drama. The emotional wounds from Yellowstone never disappeared. They simply followed the characters to Texas. And Texas itself immediately feels different from Montana in a really smart way. Montana and Yellowstone often felt open and political. Texas feels older, meaner, more secretive. Rio Paloma almost feels like a town where generations of violence have been buried under money and cattle branding. That atmosphere is mostly created through Annette Bening's Beulah Jackson, who already feels like one of the strongest villains this franchise has introduced in years. Beth Dutton has faced powerful enemies before, but Beulah is different because she never tries too hard to intimidate anyone. She already knows she owns the room the second she enters it. When she calmly says, "The ranch is my dominion," it does not sound dramatic. It sounds factual. That is what makes her scary. John Dutton used fear emotionally. Beulah uses power structurally. She controls the slaughterhouses, the local economy, the ranching business, and probably half the people in town. Even the sheriff feels like someone cautiously orbiting around her influence. Beth instantly recognizes this. That is why their early scenes work so well. Their conflict is not really about cattle prices or business negotiations. It is about territory. Beulah expects obedience because everyone else in Rio Paloma already gives it to her. Beth's refusal immediately turns her into a threat. And honestly, Kelly Riley plays Beth differently here too. She is still sharp and dangerous, but there is a quiet exhaustion underneath her now. Yellowstone's Beth often seemed powered entirely by rage. Dutton Ranch's Beth feels like someone desperately trying to avoid becoming that person again, which is why Rip hiding Wes's corpse from her becomes such an important detail. Now, the murder mystery surrounding Rob Will could easily have become generic TV drama. Reckless ranch heir kills cowboy, powerful family covers it up, rival ranch gets pulled into the mess. We have seen stories like that before. But Dutton Ranch makes it more interesting because of what the murder reveals about the Jackson family itself. Rob Will killing Wes does not shock Beulah or Joaquin nearly enough. That is the important part. Their reaction feels practiced. Joaquin immediately moves into cleanup mode. Beulah focuses entirely on protecting the family name. Nobody behaves like this is the first terrible thing Rob Will has done. And that completely changes the atmosphere around the Jacksons. They stop feeling like normal ranch rivals and start feeling more like a dynasty built on buried violence. Even Rob Will himself is fascinating because he does not act like a calculated villain. He acts unstable, emotional, dangerous. Almost like a man raised believing consequences do not apply to him because his family's power will erase every mistake. And honestly, that may become the Jackson family's downfall later in the season. Because unlike Beulah, Rob Will creates chaos instead of controlling it. The moment Wes's body ends up on Dutton land, the entire series changes direction. Suddenly, Beth and Rip are not just building a ranch. They are standing on top of another family's secrets. Now let's talk about Rip's decision, because I think many viewers misunderstood it at first. On the surface, it seems ridiculous that Rip would find a dead body and immediately decide to secretly dispose of it himself. But psychologically, the choice actually makes perfect sense for his character. Rip is trying to protect peace so aggressively that he accidentally creates more violence. That is the tragedy of Rip Wheeler. He believes love means carrying burdens alone. He sees how hard Texas already feels for Beth. She hates the heat, distrusts the locals, and immediately senses danger around the Jacksons. Rip understands that if police investigations and murder accusations suddenly invade their ranch, Beth will go straight back into war mode emotionally. So he handles it himself, not because he wants power, not because he enjoys violence, because he desperately wants Beth to have one peaceful moment in her life. And ironically, that decision may become the exact thing that destroys their peace later, because Beth can survive enemies. She can survive bloodshed. What emotionally damages Beth the most is secrecy. Rip knows that better than anyone, yet he still chooses silence. That tension already begins building when Beth wakes up at night and notices Rip missing from bed. Longtime Yellowstone fans instantly understand why that matters. Beth notices everything, and secrets inside this universe never stay buried forever. Speaking of buried secrets, the mine shaft scene at the end of episode 2 might quietly be the most important moment in the entire premiere. At first, it almost feels like classic Yellowstone cleanup business. Rip disposing of bodies is not exactly new territory for fans, but the context here is completely different from the old train station days in Montana. In Yellowstone, Rip understood the system completely. In Texas, he is improvising. That makes this dangerous. He does not understand local politics yet. He does not know who might already be watching him. Most importantly, he unknowingly inserts himself directly into the Jackson family's cover-up. If Beulah eventually learns Rip moved the body, he suddenly becomes both a threat and a useful asset at the same time. And the really terrifying part? Beth still has no idea how involved they already are. But surprisingly, the emotional heart of the series may not be Beth or Rip at all. It may be Carter. This is honestly the first time Carter truly feels like his own character instead of simply the traumatized kid Beth and Rip rescued in Yellowstone. Texas isolates him immediately. He is older than most students around him, socially awkward, and emotionally desperate for connection outside ranch life. That vulnerability explains why Oreana affects him so quickly. And I actually think their relationship is being set up much smarter than people realize. At first, Oreana looks like the typical rebellious rich ranch girl, but the reveal that she is Rob Will's daughter completely changes the meaning of her behavior. Suddenly, her rebellion feels less playful and more emotional. She clearly wants distance from her family. That parallels Carter perfectly. Both characters are trying to escape the emotional weight of where they come from, which is why their chemistry works. But their relationship also creates the biggest long-term problem for Beth, because Beth can fight enemies strategically. She can fight business wars. She can fight corrupt families. What she cannot easily fight is Carter's emotional attachment. If Carter truly falls in love with Oreana, the Jackson family stops being just enemies. They become personal. And that is where Dutton Ranch starts feeling deeply connected to Yellowstone's original themes again. The franchise has always been about family becoming both strength and weakness at the same time. Love makes these characters human, but it also makes them vulnerable. Even the smaller supporting characters already feel layered in ways that classic Yellowstone side characters sometimes did not. Zachariah instantly stands out because Mark Menchaca plays him with this calm, almost spiritual confidence. God loves cowboys. That line honestly explains the entire tone of Dutton Ranch. Because this series understands that cowboys inside the Yellowstone universe are treated almost like a dying religion. These characters live by codes most modern people no longer understand, and the show romanticizes that worldview while still exposing how destructive it can become. And that is exactly why Dutton Ranch feels like a true Yellowstone sequel. Not because it has Beth, not because it has Rip, not even because it has ranch wars and murder cover-ups. It feels like Yellowstone because it understands the emotional tragedy underneath all those things. These are people chasing peace while carrying violence inside themselves. And no matter how far they ride, that violence keeps following them. Thank you for watching.